speaking of good pensions, so this is a clip that was from the Storm Huntley programme on Channel 5 this afternoon. And I think that it's important to understand that even though there's this big disparity in the wages of working people and how much older people are getting in pensions, right? We need to talk about this. There's a big discussion around the triple lock, and we shouldn't say, well, why should they get their pension rising by inflation, but our wages don't rise by inflation? What we should be saying is that we need better wages, right? Because there's been a lot of discussion about getting rid of the triple lock, and we absolutely need to keep it, right? Because remember, we will be retirees at some point. We will at some point need to rely on the state pension, and it's good that they get good pensions, right? Not good in terms of the rest of Europe, right? The rest of Europe gets much better pensions than we do. Look at Norway. They took $1 trillion worth of oil and created the biggest pension fund in the world with 2% ownership of all shares on the planet, right? And that has got very lucrative pensions for people who retire in Norway, much better than ours here in the UK. And so I think it's fine that they get these upgrades. I just think that it's unfair that working people don't get the same level of increase in wages because they've stagnated for so long. And Marina Purkiss is a lefty commentator from Byline Times. She's got a podcast called The Troll. And she was on Storm Huntley, and they were having a discussion around the pension triple lock. And she wants to get rid of it, despite the fact that when she retires, she'll need to make use of it as well. Let's take a look.
Triple lock has done some really good things in terms of alleviating pensioner poverty, which in the 1990s, I think it was like 1 in 4 pensioners living in poverty. So it's done great things. Now, however, I think it needs to be scrapped so that we don't have the triple lock, but we just align with earnings. So I don't understand now.
So you would drop the double lock, not take away the earnings and just focus on earnings?
Just focus on earnings now. The fact that we're considering an 8.5% rise, like, why is it deemed so sacrosanct that, the pensioners, why don't we have this for carers allowance or for disability?
Okay, right, Marina. So you've made a really good point there of why is it sacrosanct for pensioners? Why don't we get it for carers too? And instead of saying, okay, let's make sure that we have it for both, right? Make sure both these people's living standards increase. You've gone, I'm going to take it away from the old people and also eventually myself, right? Because that triple lock will increase over time and will be massively increased by the time when you retire. In fact, your pension, if the triple lock stays, will be more lucrative in terms of purchasing power than pensions are currently now. So all you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot by getting rid of all of that accrued increase in pension over the course of however many years until you retire. Right? It may be a long time in the future, Marina. You're a pretty sprightly young person at the moment, but it always pays to plan ahead.
They also can't rely on an income. They need this. So I think it's really, really cynical, but it's because pensioners tend to vote Tory that it's like we can't upset them. But at this moment, given that there is a limited pot of funds, we just saw over the weekend £100 billion wasted by this government. There is a limited...
Okay, first of all, we're a sovereign currency issuer, right? Deficits don't matter. What matters is material resources in the economy. Now, that may be something we come up against as our population dwindles and we become a lot more top-heavy in terms of our population structure as the baby boomer cohort goes into retirement, right, or finishes off going in through retirement, right? So it'll be a lopside, and we might have a productivity issue from then, which means that we can't be as profligate in terms of our deficits. But we have a strong currency anyway, right? And second of all, even if you do accept this framing, this household budget framing, which everybody needs to stop doing, right? Stop doing the household budget stuff. It's not how government budgets work. Please stop, right? You can't say that there's limited funds available when you're a sovereign currency issuer, right? So don't do it. Don't do the household budget stuff, Marina. You're better than this. You know it's not true, right? You know it's not true. If the Labour were in power, you'd be making allowances for additional bond issuance to cover the deficit, right? And that'll be fine. It's fine to run deficits. Everyone should go read Stephanie Kelton. She knows what she's talking about. But even if you do accept that framing, the household budget framing, right? Instead of say, well, hang on a minute, we've got limited funds, so let's screw over some old people. How about let's tax the wealthy? Let's tax actual wealth. Let's increase capital gains tax, right? Let's increase dividends taxation. even if you do believe, let's take like the Keynesian prospectus, where you can deficit spend and you can fiscally expand for new infrastructure spending, but when it comes to day-to-day spending, it has to come from general taxation, right? Okay, sure, this is a day-to-day spending on a pension, so just tax the rich. Why are you constraining yourself to the Tories' current tax plans and the Labour's tax plans too, and not introduce something on top of that when I know already, Marina, you've advocated for a wealth tax on your very own podcast?
Pot. Why are we still unevenly distributing it to people now who aren't in that? And bear in mind as well, 1 in 5 pensioners is a millionaire by, you know, their earnings and the house they own. Whereas at the moment, we've got the highest...
1 in 5 pensioners could still be living in poverty. And
This
then,
is just
isn't
public
it...
sector.
Understood. And I'm just saying, at the moment, the tax burden is the highest it's been since the Second World War. If you've got a limited pot, which is what we've got because the Tories...
Okay, well, ignore that. Speaking about tax burden, right, it is high in terms of our history. But in terms of, say, for example, European tax burdens, we're not actually that high. We're like upper middle of the pack in terms of tax burden. There is still room for more taxation. Again, on wealth and on capital gains would be the places that I would look to tax, because these people are not productive, and we need to encourage productivity rather than encourage people who are unproductive, who are engaging in rentier capitalism, right? So you can do both of these things.
Tories have absolutely wasted loads of money, then the focus surely needs to be on middle income or people in work, of working age who've got a massive tax burden. Just so you know as well, marginal tax rates are what absolutely kills people. Marginal tax on someone with 3 kids earning 50k, they pay a marginal tax rate of 68%. So basically, it just feels like what we're seeing with the triple lock is it's a transfer of funds between...
Is that true that 1 in 5 pensioners in this country is a millionaire because you don't know any of them? I mean, you are in Scotland, to be fair, and not London, which is probably where most of them are, or in like rural areas in like the south of the UK. It is true. It absolutely is true that 1 in 5 pensioners is a millionaire in the UK, but it's mostly because of housing wealth. A lot of pensioners bought their houses early in high demand areas back when they were cheap because we were building council houses at the same time. So they've accrued a lot of housing wealth that's made them a millionaire in terms of asset wealth, right? But in terms of day-to-day spending, they might not be as wealthy as we think when you look at how many assets they own or how much assets they own. But even then, even if 1 in 5 pensioners was a millionaire, means testing is more expensive than universal benefits, right? I'm always a big stickler for universalism over means testing. And so even if these 1 in 5 pensioners do get money that maybe they don't need, it would cost the state less than if they bothered means testing it. So you might as well just give out the universal benefit at that point. I don't think it's relevant to say that pensioners are well off, because 1 in 5 pensioners are pretty well off, right? In terms of how much material wealth they have. I was talking about the good pensions that they have access to earlier. But again, this is not an argument to cut down the pensions. This is an argument for having more demand-side labour reform so that we can get wages higher union density, sectoral bargaining, an increase in the minimum wage, a maximum wage, right? Workers on corporate boards, all these things they do on the continent that means they have a far less stark difference between worker pay and CEO pay, where the purchasing power of workers is much higher than ours, where they get a bigger share of the GDP.
Like the working age people and pensioners, and I just don't think that's right.
But Ben,
you see what I mean? She's just wrong. I mean, they even put it here, right? Because workers will also need a pension. Why on earth are you calling for abolishing the triple lock to save money when we already have garbage pensions in the UK and we are a sovereign currency issuer? Austerity is needless because we literally cannot run out of money. And she got dragged for this, rightfully so. Yeah, this mechanism by which wealth is transferred from younger workers to older owners is not anything to do with the triple lock pension. And exactly, she's completely wrong. She's completely wrong. So, just thought it was worth pointing out, because what I don't want to get is a generational war, right? The older generation's been, in general, not all of them obviously, but in general rather, as I was mentioning before from the comments in chat, they run kind of like a generational war against us, accusing us of being avocado toast eating, latte drinking wokesters who refuse to be able to get our nose to the grindstone to be able to earn, to be able to get on the housing ladder, right? Which obviously isn't true. But I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to engage in a generational warfare back. I've decided I'm going to stop doing that, right? I'll make factual comments about demographics, but I'm not going to hold it against them, because I've already said, you've already seen me say it on stream, that people are a product of their material conditions. And that's what neoliberalism did. It made them right-wing through the material conditions that it granted them. So I will not blame them for being subject to that like everybody is. So I'm not going to play this generational warfare against them. What I need to do is make the argument that workers and pensioners shouldn't be in this conflict that Marina seems to think that they're in, when the real conflict is the fact that all of our wealth is being extracted from us by the rentier class, by landlords, by corporations, right? That's where the wealth is being taken from, not pensioners getting too high pensions. Like, I'm sorry, that's just the truth. And unless we kind of break down this generational warfare stuff, it's just going to make every single political discussion completely pointless. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.